Su atención, por favor. Buenas tardes a todos, gracias por acompañarnos una vez más. Esta será la última junta para esta fase solamente, nomás esta fase. Esperen anuncios para la siguiente fase, para empezar otra vez, pero muchas gracias por acompañarnos una vez más. Vamos a empezar con un video, el video del Big Sur Land Trust. Espero les guste y que se diviertan hoy también.
Thank you very much. I'm Rachel, also with the Big Sur Land Trust. I just wanted to thank you again so much for coming and spending your evening here for an hour and a half or two. I also want to acknowledge all of you who have come to these meetings. This is our fourth meeting on the Carr Lake project. So those of you who have come every meeting, who have spent close to 8 hours here with us, thank you so much for your ideas into this vision plan for a new park at Carr Lake. And so we're going to talk more about that as the evening goes on. Thank you so much for taking your time and sharing your wisdom that will determine the future of what this park looks like. We're going to start this evening with a little video of a larger video that the Big Sur Land Trust has done about the kind of work we do. But there's a little piece here, it's not very long, and some of the stars in this piece are people who are sitting in this room or have been involved in this project that focuses on Carr Lake. So we thought we'd start with a little inspirational piece for the evening, and then we're going to do a little PowerPoint presentation, talk about the designs, talk about the process that you all have been involved with, and kind of recap, and then give you more information and have more opportunity for you to not only provide some more comments on the designs, but also give us feedback on how you think this process went and how we could do it better. Because there'll be more of these meetings in the future. This is the last one for this year. So we are very interested in learning from you, you're the experts, on how we can do this even better next year. So with that, we're going to start a video and enjoy.
The mission of the Big Sur Land Trust is to inspire love of land across generations, conservation of our unique landscapes in Monterey County, and access to outdoor experiences for all. All of this begins with land. Land is central to everything that we do, and healthy lands means healthy people and healthy communities. There are not enough parks and open spaces for the city of Salinas.
Growing up, I didn't really have a lot of access to open space.
We need more open space in the city of Salinas. A central place to walk, breathe fresh air.
Carr Lake is very important because it's at the center, it's the heart of Salinas.
Es muy importante que las familias estén involucradas porque ellos son los que trabajan aquí. Sería un sueño ver el lugar de su trabajo, un lugar de descanso, un lugar de actividad física, tanto para ellos como para sus hijos.
This is the land I love.
Esta es la tierra que yo amo.
This is the land I love.
So that gives you a little tour of Carr Lake. You saw it there. We're going to have an event in Carr Lake this weekend that we'll talk about more. And so for those of you who haven't set your feet on that land, or who have a long time ago but haven't been there in a long while, you'll have an opportunity to do that, and we'll talk about that more. I'm going to hand over the mic now to Mike Bellinger, who's our landscape architect, who's been working on this process, and he's going to walk us through a presentation to to talk more about all the work you guys have done.
Okay, so my advanced audio-visual person's got us going here. As Rachel mentioned, this is the last of our meetings, and I just can't tell you enough how great it's been to get your input on it. And I don't always have this many people with this many ideas, so I just wanted to thank everybody again from the start. So the project goal, just to kind of refresh our memory back to the beginning, was to create a multi-benefit park. This has been an idea for the community for a long time, and out of your way?
Yeah, there you go.
So it's been a community's idea for a long time, and the Big Sur Land Trust has taken the first big step of acquiring the land, and you guys are taking the first big step to help design it. So tonight, we're going to go through a brief presentation, kind of similar to what we've done before, and then we're going to take a short break, and then we're going to come back and talk about your final ideas for the plan and how this process has worked for you to feel part of the design. So this is the 78 acres out of a total of 400, but it's at a key location because there's a creek that comes in here, a creek that comes in here, and a creek that comes in through here. So we have an opportunity of playing around with the landscape in this area. If you remember, this is the area that has a predominant flood issue, but this is what they call high ground, which has more opportunity for us, and that's where we focus the neighborhood park. If you remember, this is the continuation school. This is, I think, the sports complex. Up here is the Natividad Hospital, Laurel Drive and Natividad Road are out here, and then Constitution Fields are out in that area. So when Big Sur Land Trust started, they met with people in the community. How can we best involve everyone? How can we best provide a support system for this project to get off the ground? Because it's really a much bigger idea than the city has worked on to date. The next step was to involve the community, bring people out to the site, and get them excited about what this land meant to them. I think that was last February, maybe a year ago. So the next step was when you guys all came that first time. This was the first part that we focused on. Was this? These are the storage barns, the storage sheds that are there on site. This is Sherwood Drive, Sherwood Road. This is the high ground, which is about 6 acres. And I should have figured out which park best relates to that you already have, but you guys have grown accustomed to the site. So how many here was at our very first meeting? Okay, so you remember that what we did is we asked everybody to take a look at these kinds of park elements and lay them out. And so we broke down into tables very much like this, and we worked through the ideas. And that first time we had 10 tables. So there was a whole variety of ideas about how to lay out the space. You know, where would we want to have large play areas, large grass play areas? How would we want to have paths work through the site? Everybody had all kinds of ideas. So the next step was we took your ideas and put them into 2 plans. And difference from the two was we heard from everybody to try to keep as much of the park activity back off the street. So here's Sherwood Drive. We have a walk, which could be a bike path that follows the street, but we have berms, low earth, and planting to separate that. And then there's a bigger area that separates the playgrounds from the street area. These are buildings which we haven't really planned, but they intend to keep them for community use. And we talked about how maybe one might be more for museum and history, and the other might be for activities like exercise or community education or even rental. And this would be playground areas, picnic areas. We also, let's go on to the next plan. So we also heard that people wanted to have basketball courts. We talked about dog area, skate park, restroom. We heard that one really loud and clear from everybody. But this one also introduced a different unique feature, which really was a high berm, a high point where you could get up over the park and look out over the entire lake. So we also looked at the rest of the property. So this was the 6 acres of park, and we looked at how the rest of the open space could be used. One of the things we talk about is to take these ditches, these drainage ditches, and lay them out like they might naturally appear in nature, just winding through the landscape, slowing the water down, allowing the planting to help clean the water. They also include trails that would cross through this land that would be accessible all year round. This one had fewer trails and smaller open pond areas. So after we presented those drawings, you guys got back together and you commented on them. And this is what we heard from everybody. You preferred this one plan, which had the hilltop. You liked how you wanted all these park features, the skate, the basketball court, the dog area over here. We have some outdoor courtyards at these future public buildings that could be used for events. And then there's lawn areas, there's pathways along the edge, and then along the perimeter, and then through the park. Your other preference was to maximize the pathways, and you were okay with that idea of having an open wetland area. Am I going too fast? Doing okay? Okay. So then we had a third meeting, and we brought these drawings back to you, and you had more comments on them. And those included, you really wanted to rethink the relationships between the dogs and the basketball and the people. So we were rethinking that area. You really liked the high berm, but you wanted to make sure that we could get an accessible walk so that everybody could make it up to the top of the hill. You liked the idea of the picnic areas, but if we needed to move them around to accommodate the basketball and playgrounds, you're okay with that. You wanted to make sure that we had enough parking, including enough bike parking. And thereby we have to make sure that we have good connections up and down the street and across the street so people can make it into the park. The other really important element everyone said was wanting to be able to bring the bikes into the park, but we showed this, keeping the bikes at the perimeter, and that way they could connect to the future off to Laurel, off to Constitution Fields, soccer fields, and they could connect down Sherwood into the city. But try to discourage the bikes in the middle of the park, just because you've got more families, you know, older people, younger people, and we wouldn't want to mix the bikes up in the middle. You also had more comments that, you know, maybe we don't want all the pathways to go out through the entire property. Maybe reserve a portion of that where nature was the dominant feature. And so we made sure that we had loops in our paths. We make sure we connect as far as we can back towards Laurel Drive and Constitution Fields. And we make sure that we can get all those paths that are walkable as much all year round. So now this represents the drawing that's on the table. There's just a tiny little bit of changes, and I'm going to go over a few of them. We had a handout at the front which described in detail every comment that was on those pages. And if you didn't get a hold of one, you might want to grab it when we take a break. Oh, they're at the tables? Okay. So if I could just point out the primary things that I think I heard at the last meeting. People wanted to maximize opportunities to get people out to the water. Even though that water may only be 3 or 4 feet deep and it won't be all year round, but at least it's an opportunity for you to see it when it's out there wet, when the birds and all the other wildlife are out there. You also suggested you want to make sure that these trails are looped. So we looped them as much as we could. And you wanted to make sure that they were year-round use. So the final plan will represent, we're going to take these ditches and reconfigure them so that they have a much natural look. And those will be, the earth will be moved. We'll take some of that dirt and use it up in the park. We'll spread it out through some of the open space to make some high points and low points, and you'll get a variety of vegetation. Sorry. The next major feature that everybody talked about was getting some seasonal pond area. So we'll be taking the middle of the site and turning it into this. It really will be a unique feature. And we don't know how big that will be because we haven't taken that next step of studying how much water comes in. Depending upon how much water, the smaller we make it, the longer it may last as water instead of drying up. So if we make it really big, it may be too big to really look like this. So that'll be something we need to work on. We're going to be doing a lot of planting, so not just around the edge of the seasonal pond, but also the upper areas of the landscape. And a lot of you have already participated in the community garden planting that's along the existing ag yard. So that will continue throughout the rest of the site. Probably this is going to be a phased project, so it'll take years for it to be implemented, but you'll begin to see the fruits of the change early on. We're going to provide a variety of paths. Some of them will be elevated. They'll be actually probably a wood, and you can walk out there all year round. What we really want to do is encourage that use of that open space for everybody. It'll be for recreation. It'll be just for escaping your neighborhood and your backyard, but it's also for your families to go out and walking and hiking and biking. The park, we've tried to pick up all your comments. You won't see a lot of big changes, but we wanted to recognize that a big part of this park is really the grass and open space for you to bring your families down, for playground areas for all ages, young and old for people like myself, to get out for some exercise. Pathways was probably one of the most important items for everybody. So there's a variety of walks in the property. They'll all be paved in the park. Some of the paths out in the open space will probably not be paved, but all the paths in the park will be paved. There'll be areas where we'll have signs for, scooters and biking. But then there'll also be the pathways where you kind of get out to the edge. There'll be benches, and you'll be able to chance to experience the open space. Picnics, picnicking, being able to bring your family down, being able to have a birthday party, having your business or the people in your neighborhood to get together for a party. So we'll have areas for up to 20 or 30 people that would have shade, that will have barbecues, that will be probably rented, I think is what the city usually does. But there's also going to be individual picnic spaces, so people could just wander in and pick a table and bring their family. We've included elements like the skates, a skate spot, basketball, and we're going to have some restroom buildings. Also, right outside the community buildings, there'll be some large grass areas that will be associated with a community event, so that maybe there's a fall festival, and maybe there'll be classrooms that come out. They can meet at those community buildings. They can go walk out into the park, not get too far if they don't have to, but provide that experience that this unique place will provide. So, along with those pathways, we'll have signs that explain the history, the natural history of how this land was formed over time by nature, but we'll also have how this land's been shaped over the years by the residents here and used by people for many hundreds of years. We'll provide some edges to the park. So we talked about how we wanted to be able to control access in certain locations. So we'll have, we're seeing lower fences with planting that allow you to see through it, but people will understand that, that's not really an area to walk through. We're going to have a variety of planting in the park. It will be a combination of regular ornamental plants, landscape plants, but also some bringing the nature of the open space up into the park. So you'll be able to see a big variety of what that's like. When we talked about kind of creating some open space in the berm, people were wondering, well, how high will it be? How will that work? How will that feel? So this is a project that we built up in San Jose. That's about a 10-foot high berm. This would be the view from the street. So you would see this really nice, open, clean edge. But from inside the park, you could see it provides an edge to some nice open space. This has a little bit of seating. So if there was a music happening, we show a gazebo on the edge. You really feel sheltered. You can see the neighborhood back there a little bit, but it's really gone. You really feel like you're at the lake. You're not at the edge of the street. So that berm we can shape that to really fit the site well. So, kind of in conclusion, we this plans at your table today, we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we're going to ask you to give us your final comments. Again, there's a handout. There's a handout of the sheets that identify. We didn't show every place where we were putting a barbecue or a drinking fountain, but we tried to recognize it on these sheets. But if we could take a break, let's come back and talk about what we see on the latest plan, because this is the last time you'll see it, maybe until next summer.